So today I'm going to talk about the game Minion Hunter from GDW, or Game Designers Workshop. It's a board game from the dark conspiracy world, where the dark conspiracy is a RPG game, and this is a board game that captures some of that. So it's based in the early 21st century, where there's been a greater depression, and because of that there's a lot of countries are isolated, but in the US there's kind of megaplexes, which are large cities, but beyond the cities there's kind of outlaw areas where it's not maintained. There's not much law, of course. And then there's also this kind of demon area where these minions are being created. So it's kind of a horror, kind of futuristic, kind of RPG universe based. But this is a board game that captures that. So obviously the minion hunters are those that hunt the minions, as would be implied. So it's from the universe of Lester Smith from Dark Conspiracy. Mine's a little bit worn, but it's a fairly big box. And the art is quite impressive. Shell Moore from 1991 did the cover art here. Kind of show looks like kind of the kind of outland kind of areas. You got your minions coming in here. Very impressive original artwork. Quite incredible detail, especially like if you look in the detail of the landscape here, etc. So on the rules also, they contain a fair amount of background. But the back gives a pretty description. Warriors against the dark and horrific future world. It's very near future. Americans are under siege by creatures of evil, creatures that feast on human suffering. Their minions spawn humanity's darkest myths. It's stories of blood drinkers, flesh eaters, shape changers, and soul stealers. Legends speak of them as vampires, zombies, ogres, ghosts, and ghouls. But the reality is far worse than had been imagined. Now they haunt a ravaged nation, stalking its lonely city streets, prowling its ruined countrysides, striving always to drive humanity to madness and despair. But sometimes the hunters become the hunted. Sometimes the prey stands up and fights back. Even in these dark times, there are individuals who uncover the plots behind the nation, slide into ruin, and work against them. In Minion Hunter, you become one of those individuals. While dark minions pursue their evil plots, you train your mental, physical, and psychic abilities for battle, collecting equipment and contacts along the way. Then when a dark encounter alerts you to the nation's peril, you work with your fellow hunters to root out and destroy the dark minion's plots. The best among you will become the most famous minion hunter, but you have to act quickly or the minions will complete their plots and the country will fall completely under their shadow. 1 to 6 players, 12 and up. So as far as the components, first there's like a advertisement for the Dark Conspiracy universe. Again, showing the horror gripping the near future, and how the map of the game fits into that. It's rulebook 8 pages, black and white. Go through that in detail, of course. And then there's an insert that's got some more optional rules that'll make it as I say, a grimmer game. It's got paper money. Unfortunately, you have to cut it out of these sheets. It'd be nice if it was like Monopoly type money where you have to cut it out, but it's pretty straightforward to do. There's a fair quantity of money. Unique denominations, from 5 all the way up to 10,000. So the money is for you get money to spend on equipment and travel. Some dice, 6-sided and 10-sided. And 6-sided is for movement around the career track. And 10-sided is for determining success or failure, tests of character's attributes, and most encounter rules. So each character maintains a character sheet, and it's got a pad of them. And then when you exhaust the pad, it's got this sheet where you can copy and print them off. But basically you have your name, and then you have your attributes of empathy, stalking, combat, and contacts. cards. There's the plot cards and the equipment cards. Just show a few examples here. So the plot cards, to see your escape, fight, say for instance, it's so it compares it, for the different attributes. It's easy versus that, average versus context in this case, easy versus empathy, average versus empathy. So it shows you what levels and attributes to look at here. And locations. So here we have it's Cobra People and Haunt. Gives you some pretty good flavor there. Equipment. So different types, knife, cat's eye night vision, Kevlar vest. Modifiers to, like in this case, combat or stalking or combat. How they're used, their value, and your turn-in value. Here's the pawns. They're not really, like well, they're not minifigures, but I quite like how they did it. It gives you kind of a nice display, unique art, two-sided, 10 of those. And there's player aid sheet that shows the various encounter charts, demon ground encounters, outlaw encounters, hospital encounters, portal dimension encounters, attribute test difficulty levels, public transportation. So these are D10 rolls. So here's the board. Nice folding mounted board. I quite like how it's presented. It just kind of gives like a kind of a classic feel to it, in my opinion. So you have the US course, and you have so you have your metroplexes, the outlaw area, and demon ground. And of course these are as you'd locate your characters. So on the edge of the board is where the start the game and they track their careers. It's called the career track. And then in the map, these are the travel routes between metroplexes where the Dark Minion plots are being hatched. If character's injured, it moves along the hospital track or recovering. Then there's the plot card track, in which the plot cards move, and the plot points track, for keeping track of the store of total plot points achieved by the minion races. Then you see along the edge here, a different example. You might draw to equipment or check versus attributes and different options if you succeed or fail. Contacts, encounters, etc. Okay, any rules here. Setup. Assign one player to be the plot card mover, another to keep track of plot points, and another to be the banker. All players begin the game with no money. Take the 4 minion race pawns and place them somewhere handy. Have the person responsible for the plot card shuffle that deck, set aside 12 cards without looking at them, they are to play, and place the remainder of the deck face down on the appropriate starting place on the plot card's track. Shuffle the equipment cards and set the deck face down beside the board. Give a character sheet to each player. Each player should mark 1 point in each of the attributes listed on the sheet and name his or her character for flavor. Have each player roll a d10. The highest roller chooses the character pawn, starts the game first, and players take turns in clockwise order. Game turns. Each game turn Minion Hunter consists of 2 smaller turns, player turn followed by a plot card turn. During the player turn, a single player performs actions for his or her character. During the plot card turn, a plot card advances along the plot card's track. Player turn, exactly what actions the player performs depends upon which portion of the game board that player's own pawn occupies the beginning of the turn. In any case, after movement has been completed and any resulting effects have been resolved, the player's turn ends. First turn, and each player's first turn player, the player's pawn actually begins the turn off the board. To start, then the player chooses one of the 4 corner spaces of the career track and places his or her pawn there. These 4 corners represent the basic skills of the 4 different types of careers: empathic, street, corporate, and security. Upon choosing a corner and placing the pawn on it, the player records on the character sheet the attribute adjustments listed on the corner and draws an equipment card if instructed to do so. Note, the corner marked security training lists an attribute adjustment of +1 combat, should be +2 combat. Career track. If the player's pawn begins the turn on one of the spaces of the career track, the player must roll the d6 and move that many spaces, either clockwise or counterclockwise, on the track. The player chooses which direction to go, but the pawn must be moved the exact number of spaces indicated on the die. The player then follows the instructions listed on whatever space the pawn ends movement upon. Note that nothing prevents players from moving their pawns completely around the board through any or all of the career areas over the course of several turns of play. In fact, players are encouraged to change careers often to receive good mix of attribute points, equipment, and money. Contact space, character gains a contact. Equipment space, character gains the indicated number of cards, equipment cards. Dark encounter space, the character encounters one of the plot cards currently in play, either the one atop the deck on the start space or the one moving along the plot cards track. Proto-dimension encounter space, the player follows the directions on the Proto-dimension encounters table on the encounter sheet. First, a test is made versus the character's empathy attribute to determine if the character can somehow control the portal in the Proto-dimension. Successful roll means that the player can roll the d6 rather than the d10 in the Proto-dimension encounters table. This is advantageous because the most beneficial encounters group together at the low end of the range of the numbers in the table. Attribute test space. Many of the spaces on the board have text beginning the words easy versus or average versus, followed by the attribute. When the character is on one of these spaces, the player makes a test of the appropriate attribute. If the test is successful, the character receives the benefit listed on the space. If it is a failure, the character suffers the penalty listed. Corner space. When a pawn moves to corner space from elsewhere on the career track, the player has a choice of either taking the attribute adjustments in any equipment cards listed in the space, or ignoring those things and moving to any one of the Metroplex City spaces in the Dark America map instead. Again, the security training corner should be +2 combat instead of +1 combat. If the pawn is moved to a Metroplex listed on one of the 2 plot cards currently in play, the character encounters the appropriate plot card. Dark America map. If the player's pawn begins the turn on one of the spaces of the Dark America map, no roll is made for movement. Instead, the player may either move the pawn about the Dark America map or to any of the 4 corners of the career track. How far the pawn moves on the Dark America map will depend upon a number of factors, as explained in the next few paragraphs. Travel routes. Red lines on the Dark America map are travel routes. They run from Metroplex to Metroplex, sometimes crossing stretches of out-of-law and or demon ground as they do so. Normal movement along these routes is from Metroplex to Metroplex, but occasionally characters may be forced to end movement on an outlaw or demon ground space, and therefore begin their next turn on that space. Map of encounters. Each time a character passes over a space marked as demon ground or outlaw, the character's player must make a roll in the appropriate encounter table. If the result is no encounter, the character ignores the space and continues moving. If, on the other hand, an encounter is rolled, the character halts in the space and can go no further this turn. The exception to this is if the encounter specifically instructs the character to move somewhere else, to the intensive care space of the hospital track, for instance. Note that character may be forced to make several encounter checks in one turn. Also note that if a character is using a personal vehicle or public transportation, the character may gain a bonus to the die roll for map encounters. However, the method of travel the player declares at the beginning of the character's turn will define what bonuses, if any, the character receives for any map encounters that turn. Movement rate. Characters on the Dark America map do not roll for movement. Rather, they move according to their movement rate as follows. On foot, character with no vehicle is considered to be hiking or hitchhiking and characterized on foot. Characters on foot move a maximum distance of 1 metroplex away from their current position. Personal vehicle. Some of the equipment cards are vehicles. If a character owns one of these vehicles, that character can move a number of Metroplex distance up to the map movement rate listed on the card instead of traveling on foot. They need not move the entire rate. Personal vehicles can also give a bonus to the map counter rolls, thereby making travel across Outlaw and Demon Ground more safe. Public transportation. Characters with or without personal vehicles may opt to use public transportation, assuming they have sufficient money to pay for the ticket. Public transportation table on the counter chart sheet lists map movement rates, maximum movement distance, and map encounter modifier for each type of transportation. To use public transportation, characters must begin their turn in Metroplex, must declare which type of public transportation they are using, trainer aircraft, how far they intend to travel, up to the type's listed map movement rating, exactly which routes they will follow, and they must pay the resultant price before beginning the move. Multiple rates. Characters who own personal vehicles are never required to use those vehicles. They may have their option to travel on foot or by public transportation. On the other hand, their vehicles are considered to be available at any Metroplex, which means that on one turn they could travel on foot, another by personal vehicle, another by public aircraft, another by different personal vehicle, etc. Characters who begin a turn on an Outlaw or Demon Ground space must move on foot. They may not use public nor personal transportation. Minimum rate. Characters on Dark America map may choose not to move at all during a particular turn. They may do so to remain in Metroplex, where a plot card has just come into play, for instance. Characters who decide to remain on an Outlaw or Demon Ground space must roll for a map encounter, of course. Plot card encounters. Characters in the Dark America map who move to a Metroplex listed on a plot card that's currently in play may, at their option, encounter that card. They're not required to do so, however. Hospital track. If the player's pawn begins the turn on the hospital track, the pawn will generally advance exactly one space along the track, i.e. from intensive care to general ward, from general ward to outpatient care, or from outpatient care to any Metroplex, a Dark America map, or any corner space on the career track. However, the player must roll a d10 for a hospital encounter before removing the pawn, see the encounter chart sheet, and must follow the directions given. Plot card turn. In each game turn, immediately after the player turn is finished, the player responsible for plot card's track conducts a plot card turn. During this turn, a single plot card is moved one space further from the initial start space, consequently one space closer to the discard space. Once it reaches the discard space, the card is turned face up, and the text on its face takes effect. Then another plot card is taken from the top of the deck at the start space and begins its trip to the discard space. There is one special case in which the two plot cards are moved during the plot card turn. When a card reaches this card space and takes effect, another card is immediately taken from the start space and moved one space along the track. The purpose of this rule is to ensure that there are always two plot cards in play at the end of the plot card turn, the one atop the deck with start space, another moving along the plot card's track. Attributes. Each character in Minion Hunter has 4 attributes: empathy, combat, stalking, and contacts. Empathy is a supernatural attribute, representing the character's psychic or spiritual power. Combat is expertise with weapons and attack forms. Stalking represents stealthiness and researchability. And contacts indicates the ability to call on friends and business associates for help. Initial attributes. Each character begins the game with 1 point each attribute. Gaining attribute points. Many of the spaces on the career track list bonuses to attributes, sometimes based upon a successful test of an attribute. Players should simply add those attribute points into their character sheets as the board space instructs. Note that some of the spaces list losses to attributes. The corporate training corner, for instance, says to subtract 1 from empathy. The gang initiation space lists the loss of 1 contact should the character fail the indicated attribute test. In failing the attribute test on the Wild Hunt space leads to a loss of all contacts. An attribute will never fall below 0 points. Testing attributes. Whenever a character is instructed to test an attribute, the difficulty of the test will be defined in the statement in the following format: level versus attribute. There are 3 difficulty levels that attributes can be tested against: easy, average, and difficult. Test levels. To make an easy test of an attribute, the player must roll on a d10 A number less than or equal to double the attribute. To make an average test of an attribute, the player must roll on d10 a number less than or equal to the attribute. To make a difficult test of the attribute, the player must roll on d10 a number less than or equal to half the attribute. Run it down. Equipment bonuses. Attribute bonuses from equipment the character decides to use are added to the attribute before it is doubled or halved for an easy or difficult task. Auto success, auto failure. Roll of 1 always succeeds and roll of 10 always fails, regardless of the attribute value and difficulty level. Equipment. Some space on the career track instructs the player to draw one or more equipment cards. The player draws that number of cards from the top of the equipment card deck, then decides for each card whether to buy the item listed on it or to turn it in for the money listed beside turn in at the bottom of the card. Equipment cards that are turned in are discarded face up in a pile next to the draw pile. Once the draw pile has been exhausted, the discard pile is shuffled and turned face down to become the new draw pile. Buying equipment. In order to buy a piece of equipment that has been drawn, the character must pay the amount of money listed as in its value. After paying the bank that amount, the character keeps the card. Attribute bonuses from the item are not to be listed on the character sheet. Rather, the player simply takes into account those bonuses as desired when testing the attribute. Special. There are 2 items of equipment in the game that allow the character the options of acquiring the item by making a successful test of the context attribute. If the character succeeds at the test, the item is acquired, just as if it had been bought. If the character fails at the test, the item may still be purchased as listed value, or it may be turned in for its turn-in value. The player may also opt to turn the card in for money rather than attempting to roll. Turning in equipment. If the player draws a card and cannot afford it or does not wish to buy it, the player may discard the card and receive from the bank the amount of money listed on as the turn-in value. Players who draw more than one card at a time may turn in any or all of them, and they may use the money gained from turning in some cards drawn to purchase items they drew. During their turns, players may always turn in a card they have previously purchased in order to receive its turn-in value, and they can use that money immediately to purchase other cards just drawn. Using equipment, characters may use vehicles to increase their movement on the Dark America map and to gain a bonus on their map encounter rolls. Anytime character is instructed to make an attribute test, they can apply the attribute bonuses on one or more items of equipment they own, subject to the following rules. Armor. Armor is listed as head only, torso only, or head and torso. A character can combine head armor with torso armor, but may not combine head with head, torso, etc., or anything with head and torso. Weapons. Weapons are listed as either one hand or 2 hands. Character may use no more than 2 hands worth of weapons at a time. Computer. A character may use no more than 1 equipment card identified as a computer at a time. Vision. A character may use no more than 1 item listed as vision at a time. Communication. A character may use no more than 1 item listed as communication at a time. Multiple equipment bonuses. There are no restrictions upon combining armor with weapons for multiple combat bonuses, and a computer with vision equipment for multiple stalking bonuses. Redundant equipment. Characters may freely move, own more equipment than they can possibly use at one time, and they can change which items they're using for each attribute test. Brakes, MPs on. Some items are fragile, and others may be difficult to find replacement ammunition for. These items are labeled, respectively, brakes on or empties on, followed by a range of numbers. At the end of each turn in which such an item is used, the owner player rolls d10. If the result is within the listed range, the equipment card is discarded. Money. As mentioned earlier, characters start the game with no money. They gain money either by turning equipment cards or letting the windfall space, career track, and passing the attribute test indicated there. Effects of plot cards. As plot cards are encountered and or discarded, they have varied effects upon the game, as explained by the following rules. Cards in play. Typically, there are 2 plot cards considered to be in play at any one time. First is a single card moving along the plot card's track. The second is the top card on the starting space. Cards below that top card are considered plots, which have not yet started, and those that have been discarded are considered plots which have already come to fruition. Encountering plot cards. The character encounters a plot card by moving to the metroplex listed on the card. Characters who move there by traveling on the Dark America map or begin their turn in the Metroplex always have the option to choose not to encounter the card. Characters who are directed at the Metroplex by Dark Encounter space in the card track, or as a result of the roll on encounter tables, must encounter the card. If both plot cards in play list the same Metroplex, the player chooses which plot card the character encounters. When a card is encountered, it is flipped face up so that players can read the text inside. If it is not defeated or discarded, it will remain face up from this point as it proceeds along the plot card's track. Major plots. Plot cards with a number values in the upper left corner and name one of the 4 minion races with a pawn in the game are considered major plots. That is, each time one of them reaches the end of the track and is discarded, the pawn for the minion race listed on the card advances on the plot points track, the number of spaces equal to the number indicating the card. This moves the pawn to 20 points or more on the plot points track. That race is considered to have brought enough plots to fruition to effectively take over the country. See ending the game below. Major plot cards also list attribute checks for escaping or fighting them, options which are explained under their headings below. Minor plots. Besides the 4 minion races who are intent on taking over the country, there are also a number of other minion races perpetrating minor plots. These plots come to fruition. They have no effect on the plot points track, but they can provide the characters a small measure of fame if defeated. Like the major plot cards, these cards list attribute checks for escaping or fighting them, as explained below. Escaping plots. Characters always have the option to attempt to escape a major or minor plot card by rolling for the attribute test listed next to the escape on the card. Different plots require tests of different attributes. Characters who succeed at the attribute test are considered to have avoided the plot. They end their turn in the multiplex where it is located, but they do not affect the plot, nor does it affect them. Characters who opt not to try to escape or who fail at the attribute test to escape must fight the plot. Fighting plots. If a character opts to fight a major or minor plot or is forced to by a bungled escape attempt, the character must attempt the attribute test listed next to the fight on the card. Again, different plots require tests of different attributes. Success. A character who succeeds at the attribute test defeats the plot and takes the card, told as a measure of his or her fame as a Minion Hunter. Major plots are worth the number listed in the upper left corner. Minor plots are each worth exactly 1 point each. To avoid confusion with plot points, we have printed the word fame in their upper left corner as a reminder of their value. Failure. Characters who fail at the attribute test are defeated by the plot and move directly to the intensive character space, hospital track immediately, losing 1 equipment card in the process. Characters who have no equipment cards suffer no further penalty. Other plot cards. There are a number of other types of plot cards. Pro-dimension cards. Immediately upon turning the card face up, the player whose character is encountered, it must turn to the pro-dimension encounters table and follow the instructions there. Demon Ground cards. The player must roll for an encounter in the Demon Ground encounters table. Corporate Raid. The player must immediately follow the directions on the card. Wild Hunt. The player must immediately follow the directions on the card. False Lead. There is no plot or encounter here. The character has been misled by a red herring. Ending the game. Play continues until one of the 4 minion races pawns reaches 20 points or more on the plot points track, or the very last plot card discarded, whichever happens first. Minions win. If one of the minion races achieves 20 points or more on the plot points track, that race has taken over the nation and all the players lose. Players win. If the last plot card is discarded and none of the minion races has achieved at least 20 points, the players all win the game. Most famous. If the players win, the player whose character is the most famous Minion Hunter achieves the best win. To determine which character is the most famous, players add up the number of points worth of plot cards their character is defeated. Remember that major plots are worth the number listed in the upper left corner, and minor plots, those with the word fame, listed in the upper left corner, are worth exactly 1 point each. The character with the most points is the most famous. Ties are broken by comparing the amount of money the characters have after turning in all their equipment for its turn-in value. Minion Hunter, and then there's optional rules like a Grimmer game. Some players may wish to play a more difficult version of the game. For some such people, recommend use of one or more of the following optional modifications to the basic rules. Note that these options are listed roughly in order of increasing difficulty. Reduce distractions, remove all false lead, wild hunt, corporate raid, and redeeming ground cards from the plot card deck. The more types you remove, the more quickly the remaining cards proceed along the track. Increase plot points. Begin by adding 1 point to each card. If you desire more difficulty, try adding 2 points to each, then 3, etc. Fame points remain the same. Enhance minor plots. Each time a minor plot card is discarded and defeated, move all 4 of the major plot markers 1 space upward on the plot points track. Reduce response time. One way of increasing the game's difficulty is to reduce the response time by beginning the plot card deck 1 space closer to the discard space than normal. Major plot head starts. Roll 1d6 for each of the 4 major plot minion races, and start its pawn. At that number on the plot points track before the game actually begins. For setup, I'm going to be doing 2 players. So you set the money, in some convenient spot in different donations there. And who's ever in charge of the plot points track takes 4 minion races. Faye, Et, Nukud, and Mordock here. Set them off to the side. And then the plot points card, take 12 of them out, just randomly, of the shuffled ones, and you place the remaining ones on the plot card track on the appropriate location. Since I'm doing 2 players, of course, I'll start it here on the 1-2 player start. Shuffle equipment cards, set them off to the side, face down. Character sheet for each. I'm just going to call them Mr. Green and Miss Blue. And give 1 point for each of the attributes in each of them. So who goes first? Mr. Green, Miss Blue. Miss Blue goes first. Then we'll get into the first turn. So Miss Blue goes first. She'll start on the corporate training. Then the attribute adjustments are +2 stalking, +1 contact, -1 empathy. And I'll indicate it's corporate here, that way you can do those adjustments. So in addition to the attribute modifiers, for corporate training, she also gets to draw 1 equipment. So she'll do that. It's a Suzuki Sparrow transport, value of $950, turn in 95. So they don't start off with any money, so she doesn't have the $950 to buy that. But she will turn it in and get the $95. Then roll. 4. She can go clockwise or counterclockwise. She goes here, she'll get a +1 contact, so she'll do that. And increase her contact value. Then plot turn. Move the plot card over. So on the back it shows where the plots are happening, and they'll want to get to these spots to stop the plots, because when it gets to the end, if they don't, the minions might get some plot points. And then we go to Green, Mr. Green. He's going to go in street training. Which is +2 contacts, +1 stalking, or exit to the map. So I'll indicate here that he's doing the street. Roll. 5. So if he goes 5 here, you can draw 1 equipment, or if he goes here, Gets a dark encounter. He'll draw equipment. Grenade launcher. Value 550. He doesn't have money for that. But he can turn it in for 55. So we'll get $55. Keep his money over here. Then the plot card moves. Again, they're not on the board to stop that yet. And then Miss Blue goes. 6. So windfall, she can get some money here, or street fight, so she wants to get the money. So it's easy versus contacts, and she does have a. She's got 2 contacts, and then she also gets the +1 contact for corporate training, so she's up to 3. And then for easy contacts, you double that, and then you have to get that or lower, so that would be 6. If she succeeds, she gets $50,000. If she fails, she loses a contact. And she succeeds. Gets $50,000. It's kind of like hidden Monopoly there. So she now has $50,095. And then the plot card moves, and now it discards. You flip it over, and the Fae folk are going to advance 2 because they weren't able to stop them in time. So the Fae are going to move 2 points on the plot track. I'll set them on the side here so we can look at them. Discard that. You have to discard it. You set another one there, so there's always 2. And then Mr. Green goes. 3. Either do a meat fence or dark encounter. He'll do that because he wants to try to stop the minions from getting more plot points. So he'll move to either plot card Metroplex, so Chatalanta or Seacouver. I assume Chatalanta is kind of the grouping of Chattanooga and Atlanta, and of course Seacouver is Seattle and Vancouver. So he'll go to Chatalanta. So let's go in there. Go to Chatalanta. Seaborg Chainling. It's just a minor plot, it's only for fame. Escape, difficult versus combat. Fight, easy versus contacts. So he's got +2 contacts, so that's good. So he's got the 2 +3. And since it's easy, you double that. So 6 or less. 10. So unfortunately he failed that. So if he would have succeeded, he would have stopped that minor plot and got fame, but he failed, so he goes to intensive care. And he loses 1 equipment card as well, but he didn't have any to lose, so he won't lose 1. Then move the plot cards. This one stays up. And then Miss Blue goes. And she's got a lot of money now. $5. So the psychic test facility. Empathy 0, no effect. 4+, you can gain empathy. Or move to either plot card metroplexes, and they want to stop them from getting points. So she's doesn't have good empathy, so she's got an EMP of 0, so this one would have no effect anyway. Because she's a corporate with 1 and then -1 empathy. So that's no good. So she's so as far as going here, since this is a minor plot, it's not going to have any effect on the plot point track, so she's not going to worry about that one. She's gonna instead go to Seacouver in case that's a major plot. So she'll do that. See what the card is. This is a Morlocks. Some like time machine stuff going on there. So if that gets all the way, they'll get 3 points in their resource track, on their plot point track. Escape is average versus stalking. Fight is average versus combat. She's not great at combat. She doesn't have any weapons yet, and she doesn't have any bonuses. But she'll give it a shot. Let's check her stalking though. She does have +2 stalking, so she doesn't want to go to intensive care. So she's going to do an average versus stalking, which means she has her, 1 + 2 or 3. So she needs a 3 or less. She gets lucky and she survives. So she wasn't able to stop that plot from advancing, but she can stay in that spot. And the plot movement. So that one just comes to fruition. That won't have any effects on the plot points. And since that one moved off, I just want to keep 2 in play. So on Mr. Green's turn, he wants to advance in the hospital track, but first he's got to roll for a hospital encounter. So to 1, healing proceeds rapidly. 2, +1 empathy. 3, don't advance. 4, blood rate advance, but see the easy combat or roll, lose 1 contact. 5, moralic attack or no encounters. 1, empathetic nurse, healing proceeds rapidly, advance, then take another turn. Okay, that's good. 7, no encounters. So he's about to get checked out. Moved along pretty well. Plot card movement. Move it along. So actually the Morlocks, they were in Las Vegas, not Seacouver, so she's in Las Vegas, where she succeeded at her escaping. But the other one's in Seacouver. So she doesn't think she'll succeed at that one, but she's gonna move. She doesn't have any transport, so she can either move up on the map here, or she can move to one of the 4 tracks and start a different career, do the same one. She's gonna kind of move up here towards Seacouver. She can only move 1 Metroplex though, because she doesn't have any. Well, she actually could buy public transportation since she has some money, and she'll do that. So actually she's going to take the train to see Coover. It's $250 per Metroplex. You can go 3 of them. And he has +3 to Outlaw and Demon Ground rolls. So she goes through. If she goes through Reno, she only has to make 1 roll for an outlaw area. She'll do that. So it's 500 total. Go to Reno, and then she's going through the outlaw, so she has to roll for an encounter there. But again, it's a +3 to the roll, and higher are more favorable. So 2 +3, 5. Attacked by eco-terrorist missile, hull movement, vehicle destroyed. If on foot, go to intensive care. So she's got to stop there, but she was on a vehicle, so she doesn't have to go intensive care. But then the Morlocks advance in the plot truck. Now they have 3 points. And then set 1 down. So he's got to see if he gets out of the hospital. He's got to do a hospital encounter. Healing proceeds rapidly, so he's good. Now he can go into any. You can either go into any corner, training location, or he can go to any Metroplex. And he needs some equipment, so he's going to go over here because he's going to go into corporate training now, and I'll indicate that. Which will be +2 stalking, +1 contact, -1 empathy, and draw 1 equipment. So the equipment is a Kevlar helmet. Its value is 50, turn-in is 5. And it turns out he has $55, so we can buy that. He's got 5 left. So now he has that, which provides +1 combat, which is good. Four. So you can move to either plot card Metroplex, which is good. So maybe he's got at least some possibility of combat there since he's got a helmet. He'll go to see Coover. See what that is. It's a Demon Ground. Roll for Demon Ground encounter. And Charter. 5. Attacked by ET Death Ray, hull movement. Vehicle destroyed. If on foot, go to intensive care. So, bad luck for him. He didn't have a vehicle though. Plot card moves. And also, he loses 1 equipment card too, so he just lost that helmet he got. Miss Blue goes. And since she's in a outlaw and she can only go on foot, she can't take the train or fly, so she'll just, and she can only move 1 Metroplex, so she'll go up to see Coover. Plot card moves. And then green, he's in hospital track still. There's an encounter. Hospital encounter. No encounter events normally. Plot card. Miss Blue. So she has the option of moving off to corporate, off to the career training, and she'll do that. She'll go back here again. She wants to stay in corporate training because she'll get to draw one equipment. Ramtech Assault Armor. Value 1200, turn in 120. It's +3 combat but -1 stalking. She can easily afford that. So now she's got some armor. So plot, it advances. Fey Folk, advance 3. So we're up to 5 points now. Put another one down. So now we have Texamoros in New Orleans. He's going to see if he advances in the hospital encounter. 7. Does advance. Plot card. 3. Move to either plot card Metroplex. She'll go to Texamoros. See what that plot is. It's only a minor plot. So escape is easy versus stalking versus difficult versus combat, and it's not going to prevent them from getting plot points, so she's not going to do it. She's just going to try to escape again. And easy versus stalking. So her stalking is 1 + 2 or 3. Double that for easy. She succeeds, but she has to stop there. Plot advances. It happens. Another one goes off here. So plot New Orleans. Now see if blue comes off. He does. And he can either go to any Metroplex, or he can just go to a corporate site. It's a training site, but he's got to try to keep them from advancing, and he has low combat, but still he'll go to New Orleans. The new kids. So it's difficult versus empathy for fight, or easy versus stalking for escape. And unfortunately he's got 0 empathy because he's got 1 but -1 for corporate, so he's 0. The only thing he can try to do is escape. His stalking is good. He's got 1 + 2 or 3 and double that for 6. He makes it, but he has to stop there this turn. And then it advances. So that's Minion Hunter from GDW, 1992. It's a board game from the Dark Conspiracy RPG universe. Quite liked it. Seems quite a bit ahead of its time. It's got like how it captures attributes. You have a lot of strategy you have to think about as far as, are you going to go on the board, are you going to build up your abilities as you go around the career track, what career track you're going to use, are you going to fight or escape, are you going to try to buy weapons, are you going to cash in your weapons when you get them. So a lot going on. I like that you can play it solitaire as well, or multiplayer. Definitely recommend it. I'll do it again. I'll give it a it's unique enough that it's kind of its time. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Minion Hunter from GDW, 1992. Thanks a lot.